Welcome to episode 9 of the Loane Hockey Podcast. And today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about the modern power play emphasis and the emphasis in ways in which the modern power play has changed the game of hockey and how it can continue to change the landscape of the game over time as well. So, when we talk about modern power play, there's a lot of overloading when it comes to a 1-3-1 style power play system and the leverage of using the 1-3-1, especially with constant fluidity and with hybrid structure. So, you can interchange the 1-3-1 nowadays because it evolved from what Guy Boucher originally used in Tampa Bay as the 1-3-1, and it started a trend for the teams around the NHL to utilize that in the future and to the modern day game. And now you can utilize it in modern day ways. You can change it to a bit of an umbrella, you can change it to a bit of an overload. In the 1-3-1, you can change it to where the three players are shifted a little lower, a little higher in the zone, depending on where players are stationed at. And you can also use a 2-1-2 style net front power play where you have two players either at the net front or below the goal line that that end layer inside the power play structure. So that way those players are able to generate and they have a better chance of generating around the net as well. And there's a lot of modern emphasis on an interchanging 1-3-1 with that 2-1-2 net front. And there's some teams that are starting to embrace that 2-1-2 a little bit more. For example, Toronto's a team that has utilized it a little bit. Seattle's utilized it a little bit because they're teams that have some really good net front players and they have some really good skill players on top of that. So they understand how to use and leverage the net front ability with their possession sequences and handling pucks around the net. And Colorado is another example. So Colorado, Seattle, Toronto, those are a few main examples in terms of the teams that have actually utilized it within the NHL and how important and how potent it can be when it comes to generating quick strike offense and also being able to change sides and generate change the sides possessions from behind the net as well. So when you're being able to generate change the sides possession behind the net, it doesn't necessarily force the D to collapse. It forces them to stay stationary and they can play a little possession down low deeper in the zone, which is nicer because you don't have to worry about playing a puck possession game with that initial two at the high end of the offensive zone. You can play a little deeper in the zone, which is nicer from a puck possession standpoint for modern power plays as well. And so another big thing when we're talking about modern power plays is the importance of the bumper player. And the bumper player has changed a lot of different ways with its constant fluidity around the bumper player. The bumper is able to position themselves in ways where they're able to anticipate passes better and anticipate patterns better. So they're able to understand and get a better read on those situations. And another big thing with this is how using the bumper, you can really utilize a defenseman in that role nowadays because there's so many good skaters, so many good puck handlers, and so many good elusive footwork defenders in the NHL. And for example, really good bumper defenders who could play that bumper role really seamlessly would be Merrill Haskin, Cale Makar, and Quinn Hughes because of the feet, the puck skills, the shot. So there's a lot of aspects of their games that link together when the bumper is in play there. And so that's really effective. It's important to have a handedness advantage when it comes to the bumper as well. So that way there's a quick strike offense and then they're able to generate off that shot right away and off the catch. So that way they're able to get pucks on that a little bit faster, depending on their handedness and how effective they are utilizing that. And another big thing when we're talking about modern power plays is being able to leverage entries and leverage that space inside the offensive zone between the top of the circle and the blue line, moving laterally into space. By being able to manipulate that area of the ice, moving laterally, it's going to force defensive coverage to stretch out. It's going to force them to adapt and force them to potentially squeeze back into and shift back into their PK structure. So by being able to hold them off a little bit, it allows the offensive team, the team at the power play, to be able to extend possessions in those scenarios as well. And so the 2-1-2 net front, and going back to that and how the Leafs utilize it, they were able to utilize it where, like I mentioned before, they would use some possession sequences below the goal line, and they would like to play a little triangular type sequence with the bumper guy. So the bumper guy would be a little lower, a little deeper in the zone because they have that those two guys behind the net or at the net front area. If they're at the net front area, the bumper will move a little higher in the zone. If they're below the goal line, the bumper will move deeper in the zone. So that way the bumper is able to be an option on either side. So this forces the bumper in that position to move a little bit more compared to the regular 1-3-1 because the 1-3-1, you have three players in that middle especially the bumper, they're all pretty much in line with each other. They don't necessarily move a ton. So with the 2-1-2, what's really different is the bumper has to be more relied upon for support and adding layers to the power play. So that's really important for them in that situation. And it was really important with the Leafs at the time as well to be able to utilize that. Sometimes John Tavares would be doing that where he'd be supporting all over the ice as the bumper in those 2-1-2 situations with the power play usage as well. And another thing, and talk about the Leafs, how they were able to utilize a 5-man and 5 forward power play unit, and how it was able to change the offense was you had Mitch Marner at the point, who's not necessarily a huge threat with his slap shot or anything. Mitch Marner is really skilled with the puck. He's really dynamic with his feet. He understands how to use deception and manipulation. So at the line, it becomes very important for him to utilize that. Sometimes skaters and defenders are better skaters. So the lateral movement and the lateral agility is really potent for them when walking the line high in the zone on the power play sequences. But at the same time, Mitch Marner is really good at being able to adapt to that role and being able to adapt to making plays all over the zone. He can make plays deep in the zone too, flat on the ice, which is really effective. Sometimes defensemen can't do that, but he was really crisp on his passes. So being able to use Marner there was really an advantage for the Leafs at that time. And another big thing when we're talking about modern power play specifically, but also power play sequences a lot of the time is the importance of reentry. We talked about reentry at 5-on-5 and power play sequences yesterday, but with reentry settings and the importance of being able to reenter the zone with speed, getting into your ice, getting into the middle of the ice as fast as possible, and not allowing the defensive coverage to set up and create chaos for them and manipulate them is very potent in terms of being able to not only re-enter the zone, but also being able to try and generate more scoring chances and try to generate more lateral movement, extended possession, and keeping the defensive coverage in constant chaos. So that way it tires them out a little bit faster. And so moving off that, we talked about the Leafs a lot, and there's a really good example, and they've shown this a few times past few seasons where John Tavares, if he were to get a pass from Austin Matthews, and Austin Matthews was in that strong side face-off circle, what Tavares would do, he'd have his back to Matthews and he'd have his stick ready on the ice. So Matthews would make the pass, Tavares would receive it, he would catch it right away, one touch, and then he would slap it off his stick rather than having to turn his body and then try to shoot off that, where defensemen can close on him a little quicker in those scenarios. So having his back to him really allowed him to get that shot off much faster. Another example was the McDavid and Draisaitl. McDavid and Draisaitl started that in Edmonton, where Draisaitl is back to McDavid, same play. He has back to him, he would receive a pass, slap it off his stick quickly. So the bumper player nowadays is getting much better at anticipating passes, and they're anticipating the flow of the offensive zone much better. So the pace is quicker, and they're able to anticipate that pace faster. So going back to those two examples, Matthews and Tavares, Draisaitl, McDavid, very potent and allows them to quick strike on offense and inside the offensive zone as well. And there's a lot more emphasis on not only anticipating the pass, but also anticipating via body position, be able to collect pucks, make that touch, and be able to drive the net with pace. So when we're talking about 2-1-2 net front type power play scenarios, another anticipation scenarios where the net front guy below the goal line, he would angle himself in a way where he's about to collect that pass below the goal line. And what he would do, he would quickly maneuver with his backhand to his forehand off the touch and quickly maneuver his feet to be able to generate a chance there as well. Jonathan Toews was really good at that when he was playing and when he was using his net front ability at times in Chicago. And he was really key for them when doing that and being able to generate net front chances in power play settings. And sometimes when it comes to modern power plays, overloading the net front can be good and can be bad because if you have numbers all over the net, sometimes it can create a little bit of chaos and can reduce passing options. So that's the disadvantage to be overloading the net front area versus spreading out the width of the zone and the whole zone in general. So the passing options open up when there's more players available, obviously. So being able to have less net front presence could actually be a good thing sometimes. Because when a player is shooting, for example, they're shooting at the net front with players in front of the net, and one of those players is going to be the net front player in the power play. So already the player shooting is at somewhat of a disadvantage because you have that player at the net front there already, and you have a defender on him, most likely. So it limits the space in which the player is able to shoot at. It could likely end up being blocked. It could be a rebound setting. It could be something else that happens, which is why I believe net front presence isn't as much of a good thing as power plays emphasized. Yes, it's a good thing that presence in and around the net. On the goaltender, I don't believe so because like I said, if you have those players around the crease and inside the crease to the point where they're yes, they're shadowing the goalie, but they're limiting the shooter's ability to actually shoot and have his own range on the net. That's a problem in terms of trying to generate offense. So that's a big setting as well. And another thing is the power play drop. So the power play, the drop pass not necessarily super flashy per se, but for players nowadays, it's very important for the players off the drop pass to stay in line with each other. So that way they're able to create layers, they're able to hold the line with each other on the drop pass, and they're able to create passing seams for each other. And they can do this back and forth. They can players are getting much better nowadays at touch passing, so they can touch passes quickly back and forth between each other as well. And so there's a lot of build up that leads to that. And obviously, a lot of teams they use the two-man drop, which is one of the most normal things in the NHL, where that two-man drop is usually going to lead potentially to a better entry because it creates layers. It pushes the neutral zone forecheck back and it forces the D to drop back as well. And so I think of a really good all around power play player is Nathan MacKinnon and how well he and how elite he is off the drop pass, how elite he is with his linear crossover build up in the neutral zone, how elite he is at attacking interior on the entry, how elite at extending possession he is with pace inside the offensive zone. So there's a lot of factors that make MacKinnon really strong and really different in terms of the setup of his game and the foundations of his game for power play sequences. He's in terms of actual power in his feet and his footwork, his ability to generate that is really hard to find in the NHL and the ability to maintain that tempo when he's possessing the puck. So he's almost an automatic entry when it comes to power play settings. And he has so much space to work with. He's so good at being able to handle pucks by himself. He's gotten so much better at that over time in the NHL. And he's become an elite puck possession driver and power play settings. So he's always a threat. He's a nonstop threat, a really big player to watch when it comes to power play habits and being able to understand the flow of the game on the power play and in the neutral zone as well off the drop pass and on the rush sequences as well. And so these habits that MacKinnon has, it allows Colorado to get set up much faster. So on re-entry settings, he's able to quick strike much faster. On natural entry progressions, he's able to generate that pace much faster since he has a 0 to 60 gear that's pretty much unmatched in the NHL. He's able to get to entry settings and get controlled entries much faster than many players. And another example I thought of was Patrick Kane and his wizardly ability on the power play and neutral zone rushes and puck carrying in his time in Chicago with the Rangers and now with the Detroit Red Wings as well. How elite he is off the drop pass. He's always a player that's relied upon off that drop pass from the defenseman, usually that as that first layer. And he's always done a terrific job. This goes back to the Chicago days, playing with Alex DeBrincat when they were there together playing on the same power play, that first power play unit in Chicago as well. And how now in Detroit they're on that PP1 and they're still the same threat. They're really good off the drop pass. They can change the size possessions, one touch passes. They're really fluid when it comes to understanding each other and understanding the routes off each other. So they're really dynamic when it comes to the drop pass on the power play and being able to understand the routes and the buildup that goes into that. And change the sides possession on the drop pass is a really key emphasis when it comes to modern power plays and being able to sometimes if there's an overload on the strong side from defensive coverage, being able to change sides and be able to get a weak side entry with space, more important to be able to gain entry. Sometimes that strong side can get clogged up pretty easily from neutral zone forecheck from the opposition and the D potentially holding the line. D are usually getting more aggressive at holding the line to defend the power play nowadays. And So the emphasis on weak side changes possession can become really important nowadays as well. And another big thing of modern power plays is the benefit of having a hybrid style power forward and a hybrid style power forward at the net front. And a few examples I think of are Colorado and how they have Mikko Rantanen and Val Nichushkin at the net front of the power play. And this creates a really big threat because these are players who are they're essentially power skill forwards where they have power forward like abilities and they have skill forward abilities, which is really dangerous and it really creates a lot of different really, really unique for them to handle and really beneficial for them to handle. So by being able to have players like that who are really strong on their feet, they're really strong at driving the net. They're strong at being able to be around the net and be able to engage in corner battles and win battles, and also at the same time place heavy skill games. Really important to the modern power play player at the net front to be able to hold that contact, leverage contact, and understand how to escape certain settings with their skill as well. And so, another key emphasis when it comes to modern power plays is the importance of deception on shots. And for this example, I think of deception more with the defenseman at the blue line and more with the face-off circle guys. And a really key face-off circle player is Austin Matthews on the power play and how he's able to use deception inside his toe drag release, how he's able to use deception with his shot in general, his snapshot, his wrist shot. He's become more of a slap shot threat. He's a really big shooter and he's really good at changing the angle. And he's one of the best in the league at doing that nowadays. And there's a reason why he scored 60 goals. There's a reason why he's been so consistent when it comes to goal scoring, not just because of his power play ability, but because of that deception ability that he brings on a shot as well. So he brings a lot of different game breaking elements inside power play shots and the ability to understand how to shoot with deception and manipulation that throws coverage off, opens up lanes for Matthews to shoot through, and it opens up angles in which they're really hard to find sometimes. But you also have the pinpoint release, so that does help too. Being able to have the accuracy and the release and the power and the velocity in the shot that he has is really unique and really keyed upon for Toronto to be able to generate on the power play. And another big thing, and lastly, a big thing when it comes to power plays and modern power plays is the importance of the Royal Road. And the Royal Road is the area below the top of the circle, and it's a line that goes in the slot area. It's a straight line through the slot area. So anything across that Royal Road area becomes very hard to stop for any goalie. And it's one of the hardest saves to make for a goalie because the read has to be so fast and made so fast that goalies usually don't get there in time enough to be able to make the save. So they're forced to stretch out laterally really quickly. And players, again, they're really good at shooting nowadays. They're really good at being able to extend possession and be able to find those passing seams in small windows to the point where these goalies are seeing a lot more of these Royal Road shots, and a lot of these goalies are having trouble saving them. So the importance of generating off the Royal Road is another big thing, another key emphasis when it comes to modern power plays and the production that comes from these modern power plays over time as well.